Okay, hello. Now I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Maurice Duffy, who is a high-performance coach to international players in cricket, football, rugby, business and politics, but also way more than that. So, hi Maurice.
Hi, how you doing? You're using the American salutation for me, which is Maurice, right? And it's usually a US person who says that to me, right? But hello, how are you doing, Paul?
I'm good. I'm delighted that you joined today. So how do you pronounce it? Because I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
So my actual name is Maurice Duffy, which is spelled Dubhthhaigh. But that would be too difficult for English or Anglo-Saxon. So Morris is what most people call me. Some people call me Doc D. Other people call me a nutcase, but I'll be any definition you want. I'll be any person you want me to be.
Right. Okay. So Morris. I'll say that from now on. So So I've listed you as that but you do a lot more than that. You don't just work with elite athletes or elite business people. You work with all kinds of people from all kinds of walks of life on mindset and resilience and visualization. So, do you want to tell us a bit about what you tend to spend most of your time doing?
So up until Christmas of this year, I ran an organization that coached in over 40 different countries. We ran on average between 400 to 500 coaching assignments per month. And that was from Mongolia to Guinea to South Africa to the US, so all of the mature countries. So we worked with individuals on all of the things about leadership development, about strategy development, about personal development, about resilience that you mentioned. I also work on team dynamics, etc. And one of the big ones that we worked on over the last 12 years was organizational health, which is going to be so critical going forward with the COVID world. Yeah. And organizational health, we kind of built a model over the 12 years, which is what we call a 7x7x7. So what is the DNA? What is the DNA of an organization? Can you truly understand it? Can you measure it? And then can you turn it on? Because a lot of people think about, they'll say, okay, so I want a more creative or I want a more innovative company or an individual. But there are a number of different things. So do you want leadership at scale 5? Do you want innovation at scale 5? Because you can't get scale 5 at everything. So what is the mathematical formula for creativity or innovation across a number of different attributes? And that's what I've been doing. But I work down at Sunderland. I'm a professor there. I do some other visiting professorship work around the world. I do some consulting. I live in timeout. I play on the beach. I like going out with my dog. I'm a mixture of all of those things.
Yeah, amazing. And I think the first time I became aware of you was through the Black Swan work that you were doing and the kind of social media analytics or social media listening kind of tools that you were doing to measure.
Yeah, we built a capability on that. So social media is obviously something that we pay a lot of attention to, and that started out with me playing because I'm a political activist, and I've run a number of political campaigns for individuals. So, listening and understanding and how do you influence people on social media. So, yeah, we built a capability in that and we continue to do that. I supported and was very active in Lisa Nandy's campaign recently, lost to Keir Starmer, but I'm not too bothered about that. Actually, I think he's doing quite well at the moment.
Yeah, good. So how's, we talked a bit before we started recording about how things have changed, not just for you, but for some of your clients or the companies that or organizations you're meant to be working with. So
it's been absolutely dramatic, so, as I said to you before we started, on day one, we saw £200,000 worth of business just disappear, right? Like, just gone like that. And that obviously has a significant impact on the way you think about the business. We see, going forward, a lot of the work that we do, which is highly interactive, highly face-to-face or group-to-group, beginning to wonder how that's actually going to work in the future and work out, what changes that we actually need. We're consulting, and I've been doing some work with Procter & Gamble and with Google in China in relation to, and that kind of gives you a window of the future because they're 7 weeks ahead of us on the journey as to what's actually happening there. And there is no doubt in my mind, that the reality of the business environment going forward, which most people just don't get, is the biggest single competitor is going to be COVID. So we have to recognize that. There's a lot of people thinking we just get back to where we were. Well, you can forget that. right? You can absolutely, a lot of people are strategizing and planning on what they need to do in the future. And, the future, they're just looking to extend the past into the future. And that ain't going to happen. So, we're going to see significant changes. We're going to see, a different type of leadership, because there are a number of different things, so taking people back is not just about taking people back and getting them working. It's not about just taking them back and getting them healthy. It's not just taking them back and making them safe. It's not just taking them back and kind of recovering. There's a whole other set of dynamics there in relation to mindset and feelings and productivity and the future and the concerns for the future, because COVID ain't going away. We can dream like Donald Trump that by October, or when I'm up for election, it'll have gone away. It ain't going to go away.
Yeah. Well, I was having a conversation with Michael Owen, always where I read about. He's thinking people need to be like. He actually asked me the question, "What are your plans for 2022?" He was like, he thinks like basically this year and next year is just going to be about. It's just experiment, just like figure out how the new world, and then can't really plan to have much growth or success until 2022 maybe. So he's thinking 18 months. It's like a 18-month journey. So yeah, people thinking that it's just going to go back to normal in the next few weeks or months. It's not going to happen, is it? It's not.
Yeah, well, we have a huge debt to pay. Where's the money coming from? That's kind of one issue that needs to be addressed. We're going to have high unemployment, so that's going to be a second issue, which is going to put a burden on the economy on top of the burden we already have. There's not a hope that we're not going to be able to support the NHS in a greater way going forward. We're going to have to do all of this kind of testing and tracing, etc. So we're going to have to build huge amounts of capability. And for every single organization, they're going to have to think about it. If you're in the entertainment, or if you're in any of these businesses, the change is quite significant. I was talking to a very good friend of mine who employs 175 people, along the coast, and he was telling me, you're thinking of giving me 30% fill on my premises. It's just not an economic model. So, what am I going to do? His whole model is built upon the fact that I need a queue, which means I need a lot of people. And what he feels from going forward is that's not going to happen. So does he let the staff go? So what are the changes? What is the strategy that he needs to adopt?
Yeah. So hard to plan anything. And it's incredible how literally everything's affected.
But we tend to think of change as something that's abnormal to us, and we see it out there as something that we have to address. In actual fact, the more we can normalize the abnormal, which is the change that we need to embrace, the easier it's going to be. So let's just accept the fact, if you excuse the language, it's going to be shit for a while, right? And it's going to be a battlefield here, and there's going to be casualties undoubtedly. But let's just accept that. But now then, let's just get in and say, what do we need to do in those circumstances that's going to allow us to kind of recover and sustain the business that we have, right? And provide a platform for the future. And Michael is absolutely right. You have to kind of, think long and act short, right? And that's an important part of what business leaders need to do and strategies that we need to adopt. And in the work that I have done and what I have seen over and over again, that I would guarantee you, Paul, that within a half mile of where you're sitting, there's probably 10, 20,000 strategy documents, right? All nicely boxed in a book, in a drawer, somewhere every year taken out. We dust them off, and we always say, okay, where are we going to be next year, the year after? And it's always a line like this. We're going upwards, so we're going to go for 5% or 10% increase. Well, we're going to see that we have dropped off by 20% in going back. So now we're thinking about how do we get back to where we were. And the fundamental flaw in strategy is that thinking forward is a bad place to be. You have to think back. And that is not extending the past into the future. What you need to do is to say, okay, where am I? Where do I need to be? What is desperate? Now let me go there to that particular position and look back. And if I look back, now rather than saying, what do I need to build? Right? Because we have an escalating commitment to a failing course of action. What do I need to take out? What do I need to strip out? What is back there that I don't need right now? What can I merge? What can I turn around the other way? What are all these questions that I can ask in order to make that I have a robust and fit proposition back there in order to move forward? And when you start asking yourself those difficult questions, what do I need to get rid of rather than what do I need to build? Right? And even if it is profitable now, do I need it then? Will I need it? Because maybe now is the opportunity to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And I remember right at the beginning of this whole crisis, I was doing some work at the NHS, and a CEO in there, a very enlightened CEO, who I hope is going to run the NHS when all of this is over. But, he says to me, he said, this is a real opportunity to fix the casualty problem. Right? This is a real opportunity. We should be looking in this now to fix the casualty problem. Well, it's fixed. There's 60% less people going into casualty, right? And I'm not saying that that's right. But what he's saying is we can't just plan for them just to turn up. We have to think about the model, and let's think about in the middle of this crisis, how do we make ourselves more fit for purpose in the future?
Yeah. I get it. I mean, even on a small scale, that's kind of what I've been doing over the last month, is looking back and thinking, well, do I actually need to do what I've been doing? And in a way, it is an opportunity to kind of like start again, start something new, or a new way of thinking. So, I mean, I do miss, I get a lot of energy from meeting people face to face, and you do obviously, and you give a lot of energy to people as well. But really, I was probably guilty of having too many meetings and going to too many events that, like, now I obviously can't. It sounds a bit weird when you're an event organizer to say there's probably too many events, but probably is too many events that are frankly a waste of time, and then you have to make up the time afterwards, and you're always behind. So it is making me think, be a bit.
And it's real and it's tangible. I remember going into the NHS, and the thing I always ask the NHS is, why is every meeting 3 hours? In actual fact, people bring their lunch with them. They kind of come into a room and they create a space. I'm going to plank myself here for hours on end. And I was talking to one of the vice chancellors of one of the universities, and he was telling me about all the meetings he had all day, all the Zoom calls. And I'm thinking, when do you work? Like, when do you actually do work? So many organizations, of course we need to communicate, of course we need to engage, of course we need to plan, of course we need to strategize, etc. But the challenge which you have articulated is very similar for me. I'm thinking, I for example, I coach the Australian cricket team, right? But it'll take me 2 or 3 days to get down there. It'll take me 2 or 3 days to get back up there. And when I'm going down there, even though I might have a day's work, I'll take 2 or 3 days out, because I ain't going to go all the way to Sydney and just turn around and come straight back. But how effective is that time, right? And how much of my life am I giving up for that one proposition? Is there a more effective way to do it? And I think that we're all learning that digital transformation is can significantly enhance productivity, and hopefully we get more effective at it.
Yeah, good. Well, definitely. I mean, I know. Well, I think you always. I mean, we're doing this through Zoom. That a lot of people using Zoom, using Teams, FaceTime. But I've spoken to a few people who I think they're feeling like there's too many Zoom calls or too many meetings where it's kind of like that. Or managers or HR professionals feeling like they have to check in on people and make sure they're all right. And actually, you'd be better off just letting people get on with their job. You don't. So maybe there's too much of that being going on. Maybe that's subsiding a little bit, but you can get.
Well, it's a control feature. I think that most leaders need to demonstrate how clever they are, and sometimes they do that by creating complex issues are wanting to be at the center of the web. And the genius of any elite performer, the genius of any leader is simplicity. How can I make things easier? How can I make things simpler? And that's something that we should all strive for. If you talk to any of the kind of high performing CEOs that I work with, they'll talk about simplicity a lot. Yeah. How can I enable people to do it in a more simple way? How can I make the communication simpler? But some people just want to have everything directed towards them. So they're happy to sit on the calls, they're happy to set up the calls, they're happy to use everybody else's time up so that they feel, I need to know. Well, you don't always need to know.
No. Yeah, they're feeling like they've got to be copied into everything, or they've got to be included in all the meetings as well. You probably know that, is it the phrase, the acronym, is it HIPPO as well, like highest paid person's opinion? I've been in situations in the past where the team agrees on something and you know what you can do, and then someone will have the bright idea. Maybe we should send it to such and such to see what they think. You send it to them before you know it. They want to change it, or they want to question it, and they want to for no good reason other than they feel like because they're the highest paid person, they're the most senior person, that they have to have their little
and it's fascinating, Paul. I did a lot of sales training with Google, and one of the things that they taught me is that the most critical line in any email is the subject box, right? So what is the question that you're asking? What is the call to action? And what what is the decision you're asking me to make? And if it doesn't say it in the subject box, then you're not engaged in something. So I've kind of become famous for the fact is that if you send me an email and it's over 4 lines, I won't read it. If you put me in on a CC, I won't read it. Right. I won't read it, right? Because I'm thinking, well, why are you telling me? Why are you telling me? If you're not telling me to asking me to make a decision, well, then what is the point? And if you don't tell me in the first subject box, what is the decision? And it's amazing how it cuts down traffic, right? It absolutely cuts down traffic. And that whole simplicity. I remember, I was trying to remember the going through. I can't remember now, but it was an organization that I was working with on vision making, and we talked all the time about how do we make it simple.
Yeah, there's a great book called, I think it's Insanely Simple, which is the guy who, it's kind of part memoir but part kind of guide to brand and design. It's a guy who invented he worked with Apple, he worked with Steve Jobs, and he came up with the iMac, so calling it iMac, and the Think Different campaign. You remember the black and white famous?
I know, yeah.
Gandhi and Einstein stuff, and just Think Different. So that was Steve Jobs' big thing about trying to simplicity is really difficult to make things simple and more effective.
And the company I was trying to think of was Samsung. And when we were doing the vision on Samsung, and we were sitting there, and they had a whole day, and the vision that we came up was beat Sony. Right? And that was as simple as that. Everybody got it, everybody understood it. It was easily repeatable, and it is how do we keep things as simple as we possibly can.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. So at the beginning I was talking about the elite athletes that you work with. So you don't have to name any names, but like I was thinking this before. So some, actually I was thinking of this one. So I'm trying to relate it to my own experience. I'm not saying I'm an elite athlete or business person or anything, but when you have a certain level of success, right? So whether it's how do people adjust to that? Because you might have this huge success, different levels of success, but then you've got the euphoria around that, but then you've still got to go back to everyday life after that. So do you find a lot of the people struggle with that? Is that kind of part of the problem, where they're so focused on achieving something, then they get there, it's amazing for a little while, but then actually that feeling subsides, and then they have to go back to the grind and the everyday kind of life? And how do you keep motivated?
It's really interesting because most of the athletes are the elite, and the one that everybody knows that I coach is Steve Smith, was the Australian captain. Right, number 1 batsman in the world. But what they'll do is that they'll have seen the success already. They'll just achieve something that they have already seen. Yeah. So they don't go in thinking that can I win or how will I win? They've won. Right? So they have already won in their minds before they get there. But they have a relentless application to chase success. So once it's happened, it's gone. So you celebrate it, that you get the drinks down, but you move on. Absolutely. So I was talking this week to Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller, Paralympic. Oh, yeah. Paralympic, went to the Olympics first in 1996 when he was 16 years of age. It's been to 6 Olympics, right? He's won multiple gold medals. If he doesn't get a knighthood, something is fundamentally wrong with the system. Has got motor neuron disease, and I just think an unbelievable guy. But I was chatting to him about this, where do you get the drive from? Where do you get the resilience? Where do you get it? And he's constantly chasing it. He is constantly chasing it. All of that's, for when I retire. Now, when I'm alive, this is the next goal. So now he's planning for Tokyo. And you can imagine, after 6 Olympics, trying to go for Tokyo, and Tokyo had been taken away from him this summer when he'd put all of that work in. It's absolutely unreal. When I worked with Steve Smith and we were in Cape Town and we went through that challenges of that whole, shenanigans with that ball. And I also worked with Cameron Bancroft, who was the guy who went with the shenanigans with the ball. But, his whole drive was, to be the greatest. That's it. That's what drives him. And he will, he is remarkable because he will go home and take 10,000 balls out of a machine just to work on that. Right? And it's a relentless drive. But, the CEOs that I work with, I was thinking when you were saying earlier on about simplicity, I worked a lot with Jeff Jarvis, who ran Manpower, who built it to the $26 billion business that it was. Mm-hmm. And his strategy for 24,000 person organization was one sheet of paper on the back of his door. And I remember him telling me, he says, when I first designed it, which he called the 3 horizon chart, when I first designed it, he was thinking, people think I'm nuts, that I'm not very clever, that I'm in the wrong place. But once you saw the strategy, once you understood the strategy, everybody got it. You could communicate it easily. And I remember the 3 horizon chart, people talked about it quite a lot. Where are we going? 3 horizon chart, what are we doing? We know what each horizon looks like. And then that was over a period of time. And then under each horizon, he had 10 points. These are the 10. But for a strategy for a $24 billion business, right, it was one A4 piece of paper. Not 100 pages with 1 million charts in a drawer somewhere that's taken out, dusted up. And it was all about that simplicity.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. So people like Steve Smith and the others that you work with, they must have dips. They must have moments of doubt, or where they think, that they're struggling and like to get, what you explained, that situation with Steve as well. So how do they visualize? How do they visualize success, or how do they pick themselves back up from stuff like that? Because I think you told me about him. He visualizes going out onto the field and like what it's going to feel like and what it's going to look like and all that. So
we follow a model. So there are a couple of things that I would say. So I'm a huge believer in meditation. Right? I say if you cannot spend 10 minutes a day doing it, then you need to spend an hour. Right? So the reality, so we follow a model, so I've worked with Steve now for nearly 5 years. And I've worked with a lot of kind of high performance athletes, as I work with a lot of CEOs, and the model that we'll tend to focus on, and our brain is a muscle. So, if I say, I want you to build this, right, you'll constantly work it. You will work it and you will work it and you will work it. But when I ask you to build this, you get lazy about it. You don't understand that you have to do it day in, day out. So every single day, Steve Smith will have 6 things he has to do for me for his mind. Right? And he will accept that his mind is 50% of what he is as the athlete, 60, 70% sometimes, but it is the mental approach. And we focus it upon what I call the 5 M's, the model that I work with them, which is about mental reflection. So you got to think about things, right? But we got to understand that thoughts have energy. Too often that we have thoughts of energy. So sometimes we fight our own thoughts. So we've got to find a way of kind of absorbing the energy of those thoughts, right? And then transitioning from it being negative to positive. So how do we do that? So we talk about the mental reflection, and each day we will reflect on where we're actually at. We'll talk about mental redirection. You've got to be able to adjust the sails. So how do you adjust the sails? And you do that every day. It's not just something that, I'm going to have this idea and that's the end of it. This is a constant drive for success. Then we have a mental immersion. Right? And mental immersion is really, really important. So how do I kind of turn negativity to positivity? How do I dip myself in success? For example, Pele, used to go into the dressing room an hour before everybody else. He used to lie on the bench. He'd put a towel over his head and he'd see every goal he scored. Right? So that his frame of mind when he was picking himself up to go out there was in a very positive way. Yeah. Then we do mental visualization. And mental visualization, people think as I see it, it's a kind of movie in my head. No, it isn't. No, it is not. It's how do I touch the 6 senses? So how do I touch? How do I use each of the 6 senses and make it real? Because our subconscious brain cannot tell us the difference between what's real and what's a dream. It just thinks that's the reality. So we work on mental visualization a lot. And then we talk about this kind of think, act, do, right? So if I can get you into a position of thinking and doing at the same time. So even when you're looking at me there right now, there are thoughts flashing past your brain. If I can get you just to zero in on me, if I can get you in that moment, right, to focus 100%, and then I can expand that for as long as possible, then I have achieved. So I have a coachee who's a batsman. And, you know, one of the problems is one of the best batsmen in the world. It's not Steve, but one of the best batsmen in the world. Part of the problem is he overthinks. So the exercise I gave him is, I want you to take a tennis ball, or not tennis ball, a cricket ball, because it means a lot to you. Look at it for 5 minutes and think about nothing. Just think about nothing, right? And come back to me when you've done that, right? When you've achieved that 5 minutes. You can't do it. He's been doing it for weeks. Can't get to the point of just not having a thought in his head. And he says, when will this coaching be over, Maurice? And I said, when you can do an hour, right? And the point of this, that the exercise is, you know, we call it a flow, we call it a process. We have different names for it, but it's when you can think and do at the same time, you are in the sweet spot. That is perfection. And when you can do that, like a Steve Smith can do it, because you ask him the question, you know, what were you thinking when you're back? Nothing. When you were there at the Ashes and you were kind of beating the crap out of the English, what were you thinking? Nothing. Absolutely nothing, right? And that is what his genius actually is. It's not that he can think better than us. It's not that he's smarter or better than any of us. It's that he can be absolutely anchored in nothing, because the repetitive process, he has trained his body and he's trained his mind. What he wants to be able to do is to rely upon that instinctive response, not on the thinking response. So he cannot be thinking of the ball that's gone. I had a conversation with a whole cricket team, and I said to them, you know, bats for them. I said, if I give the bowler one ball, just one shot at you, right? One shot at you, can they get you out? No. One shot? No. Never. Can't get me out. Never one shot. But cricket's just one shot. Mm-hmm. It's just one shot, but it can't get you over one shot. What the hell are you getting out for then? Right? Because you're thinking of the shot that's gone, or you're thinking of the shot that's coming, or you're thinking about where the bowler is going to put it, or you're thinking about what you're going to do, or you're thinking about where your legs are actually at, or where your arse is, or you're thinking about where your shoulders are, do I stand for? And you're thinking about, oh, I don't want you to think of all those things. That was practice. Mm-hmm. What I want you to do is to just be there and play. Mm-hmm. Now, I do some you know, work with golfers. And on visualization and golfers, you know, we've got, you know, the disassociated and the associated part of visualization. Now, you've seen through your own eyes, you've seen yourself as a third person looking in. And, you know, so for some golfers, they like to be able to dissect their swing, right? But if they are thinking about their swing, you know, if they're thinking, I've got to hold my hand like this, and I've got to have my shoulder up like this, and I've got to hold that, and you're in the wrong place. Mm. You're in the absolute, that is for the driving range. When you're playing golf, right, and the best ones is, you know, Tiger Woods' coach, you know, that I've met many times, says, you know, when he's absolutely at his best, you know, when he goes over to reach for the club for the shot, he has no memory of getting the club or taking the shot. When I was talking to a high-performance goalkeeper, you know, and I asked him about the game, he couldn't remember some of the saves. He couldn't remember them because that was perfection, absolutely perfection. Yeah. But that's what we strive for. Sorry, I go on. It's a passion.
I love it. It's amazing that you're doing that, because like you say, people talk about being in flow, and yeah, where you're just doing. You're not thinking, because you've practiced it, and it just comes more instinctively. So
yeah. But it's very difficult to do yourself. So I can't impose it on myself. I'm absolutely rubbish at it. Right? I can't coach my wife or my kids, right? I'm absolutely rubbish at it, right? Absolutely rubbish at it. Because the first thing they'll say is, you don't do that. But the point being is, you know, that the winners, the elite, the painters, the inventors, the best ones of them, you know, they're great dreamers. Yeah. Right? They're great dreamers. So I work with, you know, I was doing some work with this CFO of a very large Indian company on, you know, a lot of investor meetings that she goes to. And, you know, being Indian and being quite small, she's 5'2", and going into North American organizations where, you know, over 50% of the CEOs are over 6 foot, even though only 14% of the population is over 6 foot. So we have this vision, the big, strong male, but on visualization, and we use it in business quite a lot. So, where's the meeting, so that you go through the whole process. So I could tell you, going into that meeting where she's going to sit, we would have planned out each person in the room where they actually were. We'd have looked at who was going to be a protagonist. We'd have looked at the kind of who was going to be a friend. For the protagonist, we'd have planned that you go give them a cup of tea or whatever else it is, because it's very difficult to fight with somebody who's just giving you a cup of tea, right? But there's all those things, right, that we go through in planning, where you sit, how you feel, all the rest of it. Because when you're presenting and you're standing up, right, for me, I do large audience presentations, right? I cannot think before I go out. Karen, my wife, often says, you're ready. I said, don't talk to me, don't talk to me. Because I'm panicking, because I have no idea. I don't want to think. If you give me a structure and say, I want you to read the speech, I'm the worst person to do it. I just want to kind of get up, and I'm either good at what I do, or I'm either rubbish at what I do. I either know my topic or I don't, but I don't want to be relying upon notes or slides. I want to be relying upon what I think and feel.
Yeah. Well, I've seen you give talks, and you are amazing. I've seen you do hosting social events as well. I've been to the St. Patrick's Day event as well.
I was doing that this morning. I'm saying I'm having a party after this. I'm planning St. Patrick's Day already. I normally don't start until about October, November, but this year I'm going for next year's already. I sent a note out to a load of people saying, let's have a party in March, Patrick Day. He'll have banned the virus by then. The way he got rid of the snakes in Ireland. I'm going to say he's going to get rid of the virus out of the UK.
Well, I hope I can be there as well, because you were a brilliant host, and you were doing stand up as well, weren't you? You were cracking all kinds of jokes. So no, but you were excellent, and I have heard you give brilliant talks as well, inspirational talk, and really hold the audience as well. I've seen you give talks in the round as well, people all around you. I've seen you on stage. So that's why I wanted you to be involved in this. So the other thing I want to talk about, something that I'm loving that you're doing, like every day you're putting things on Facebook and Twitter about, is it Mind You?
Yeah, so it's this. I'm a passionate believer in mental health, and one of the significant issues coming out of all of this trauma is mental health. I had somebody yesterday just send me a message, kind of, which was just that email which had just one comment on it, help. So it's scary, the number of people that are struggling with it, and it's scary that that we don't understand it or appreciate the fact of the impact it can have on people. I was at a school literally a mile from where I am just before the lockdown, and he was the headmaster there was telling me about the school, and it was frightening. It was simply frightening. Where he was saying to me, that obesity, which is one of the challenges that we have in schools, was not the problem that he had, was malnutrition. Right. And that there were 5 schools that were typically on the list that people could have a preference for. Yeah. Right? And on every single form, when people put a preference down, he usually comes number 6 or number 7. Right. When I was talking to the kids who were saying we're in a non-performing school, what hope do they have? Yeah. What hope do they have, right? So, for me, Mind You and mental health is absolutely important. I love talking to school kids. It was funny. Well, it wasn't funny. It was scary in a way, but, they were so pumped. We can do it. We're going to go out there. I had them all kind of lined up, these kind of 30 or 40 kids. You can do anything. You can achieve anything. We're absolutely going for it, right? Until one of the kids says, he says, I'm going to get a gun and kill everybody. And I'm thinking, no, we're gone too far. We're gone too far. God, no. Well, I was just a slight challenge. But the point being is that we have to create the motivation. We have to create the opportunity, right, for some of these kids and for ourselves. And the difficulty with mental health is, one, we don't recognize it. We don't sometimes appreciate the fact that we're suffering from it. And we don't also understand that there's help there. And we have to ask for the help. So I've been doing stuff online. I've been doing some stuff with my 11-year-old, who's kind of talks on, who's an expert on mindset, who will talk for a very long time on mindset. Having me for a father, and my wife is a politician and tends to be pretty out there as well. I think that we have created a serious problem for the world because he never shuts up. But I've been doing stuff on mindset, and that's been fantastic. We've had a huge following on that.
Yeah.
So I've never put online the meditation that I've done, and I'm now putting the meditation. I'm doing ones which is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So one of my big pals is Chris Cook. Chris Cook, English swimmer, Olympian. He swam against Michael Phelps in the next lane in Michael Phelps' last race. Mm-hmm. And Michael Phelps, where he won the world record and he won the kind of the gold, etc. And it was his very last race, and he broke all the records that were there before. And when he got out of the pool, he was asked about it, what did he feel? And he says, one of the problems was that when I dived into the pool, he says, my goggle came off. And so he says, I was swimming when my goggle came off. And he says, when I went for the turn, and he says, my second goggle filled up with water. And the interviewer said, how'd you deal with that? And he says, what's the problem? He says, I had planned for it. Right. And they're in the visualization. So I'm working with Chris now, and we're deconstructing swimming. So we're going to kind of put together, visualization exercises, which are, they're absolutely fantastic, right? On how you deconstruct swimming. So we've done, pre-swim, we've done kind of getting off and diving in before you touch the water. So we've done a couple. And I've gone out to cricketers now, and I'm kind of deconstructing cricket. And I've gone out to kind of a couple of the Premiership footballers, and I'm going to deconstruct football. And we're going to do these exercises online where anybody can go in a podcast and pull them up. So if you want to teach your kid, and the whole point being is that the ability of us to visualize has a huge impact on our ability to success. And where all of this started for me, it's years and years and years ago, but I was at the Chicago Bears and I was doing some work with them. And they were showing me, the concept that they had of virtual reality, where they used to get, the quarterbacks to look at the player that they were playing against that week. And in the virtual reality scene, they were going past them again and again and again. And 20 or 30 times a day, they were going past them again and again and again. And I remember the coach saying, and come Saturday, they'll just lie down there and they're going to say, I've beaten you all week. Again and again and again, but I'm going to beat you today. And that was the kind of mentality that they were looking to create. And I became absolutely fascinated with it, where I became a real student on visualization and on meditation. That I feel it has such a critical part to play in leadership, in organizations, and in life.
Yeah, well, meditation is not something I've really done before, but then about a month ago I started doing a little bit of meditation. So there's a place. It's unfortunately had to shut down, obviously, like a lot of and they've moved more online. So it's the Urban Zen Wellness Retreat in Felling. Well, it's a wonderful place that you can go to and do all kinds of meditation, guided meditations, sound baths, stuff like that. But they've been doing guided meditations through the Facebook page as well, and that's really powerful.
I'll give you one. I put one up recently called Yawn and Stretch.
Okay.
Just to get you going in the morning. Right? And it's literally, I think, about 6 minutes.
Right.
So it's kind of so I put a number up, and some of them are just too long. I was thinking, that's boring. I wouldn't listen to that. Especially when you're listening to your own voice, you don't want to listen to that either.
Well, you've got a good voice. I like listening. So we'll put a link underneath the video so you can find it. But the last thing I was kind of going to say, putting you on the spot here a little bit, but like if people are struggling, like if they're feeling anxious or stressed or a bit down and depressed, like what would you say to someone that might be watching this and they're struggling right now? Not just for coronavirus, but just in general, and it might be heightening those feelings. What would you say?
I do Thought for the Week on the BBC every Monday, and I get asked that question a lot. And one of the ones that I use a lot is, if you do not consciously adopt a mindset, one is subconsciously adopted for you. Right. And very few of us are in charge of our brains. We allow our brains to drift. So we have to take control of our brains. I also say, the positivity is a virus. It transmits the way to transmit is from human to human. So again, that we have to look at positivity. But the other point I would say is, that we will sit there with the thoughts of negativity or of concerns or stress, and we will fight those thoughts. Right? And part of the difficulty is then they'll wait for a weak moment. And I'm usually in the middle of the night, and usually about 3 o'clock in the morning, and they'll come whirling in. Right? And the difficulty that creates for us is that we're not in control of that process. So we have to think about those thoughts, and we have to say, they're here, that you have to let them go somewhere. Right? So we have to let them come in, and we have to kind of play around the edges and understand them, and then we got to let them go. And we got to let them go. So I say, that the one thing in life, it's Vicar Freckles, who kind of did a lot of the work on mindfulness, and that I love the bits, says, there's only one human freedom that can't be taken away from you until the moment you die. The only one that you can absolutely 100% control, that nobody can have, right? That nobody can set, that nobody can define, only you, and it's only at the moment that you die that it's finished. And that's your attitude to life. You get to choose it, right? You get to choose whether you front foot it, whether you lay back. You get to choose whether you allow people with dirty shoes to trample through your brain. You get to choose whether you give people or things rent-free in your brain. You get to choose where you put them in the brain. Do you put them right here where they're absolutely troubling you, right? Is it other people's opinions? Is it things? Don't be defined by other people, right? Don't be defined by other people. Understand that you have to take control of your brain, and understand that if you do not consciously adopt a mindset, one is subconsciously adopted for you.
Yeah, amazing. That's amazing advice. So, well, I'm already following you on social media. So, do you want to tell people how they can find you, and what's the best way to follow you, and all the things that you do?
Yeah, so I am on Twitter a lot, as you're aware. So at the Big Squawks, all right, and I squawk a lot. So at the Big Squawks is where you can find me. You can find me at Dr Maurice Duffy on Facebook, or you can find me at www.mauriceduffy.com. I've been doing podcasts with a lot of the people that I work through isolation. Some of them are very good. Ebony Rainford Brent, first black woman that played for England. Mike Williamson, who was never the greatest footballer, but played for Newcastle for a long period of time. Marcus North, who's the coach and director and coach cricket down in Durham. And a couple of NHS people as well, Jagtar Singh, who runs one of the biggest NHS, Claire Riley locally here, talking about some of the challenges. So, there's quite a lot of resources there on meditation, on visualization, on podcasts, etc. Or just send me an email at letstalk@mduffy, and as you probably gathered at this stage, I'll always talk.
Yeah, no, amazing. And not only this, but I know we met up in, was it January? I think it was January.
Oh, it was the last day I was in the pub. God, I tell you, I can't wait for that pub to open.
That was great because again, I'd met you before. I'd heard you speak. I wanted you to speak at the start of it, so I wanted to talk to you anyway. But I was going through some challenges. I was on the verge of making a big decision, I suppose, and then I felt like I needed to meet up with you, and I did. And we had for me, it was a great night anyway. So we did have a good long chat over a few pints, and so yeah, I'm looking forward to having a few more pints with you at some point as soon as we can. So okay, thank you very much.
No, Joel, I wish you every success. As I said to you, I'll turn up on the days if anybody's interested enough after hearing me talk for so long. I'm always happy to talk, have a chat, help in any way that I possibly can.
Thank you. Well, and like I say, we'll share links to everything that you talked about underneath the video. So thanks a lot. We'll end it there. All right. Cheers, Maurice. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.